One of my biggest influences that I can remember was my econ teacher when I was in high school. You know what's crazy is high school was such a very interesting experience for me. I went to a military boarding boys school. It's a very different kind of experience. Some people may have gone through that experience who watch some of my videos. I've seen some guys actually ask me which of the military schools I went to because back in Nigeria we used to have the military actually rule and run the country. And so they established all these institutions for, young boys and young girls. And you could find yourself in any of them because, our parents perceived that the discipline and the education was, top notch. And in many cases, it was, to be very honest. But again, when you're, a young preteen or teen, because we start school early back then, it's not the most interesting experience. So I remember academic wise, it was a big challenge, not being able to access home every day like, every child probably should, in my opinion. But I remember my econ teacher. In all of this madness, I remember my economics teacher who was actually very adept at bringing economic principles to a young mind like mine and making them make sense. He was actually so good at, creating this, I would say bridge between reality in terms of economic principles and economic guidance and bringing it to the real world. And I've looked at the gaming industry and almost everything from that perspective ever since then. I mean, yes, at the time, not being able to maybe get a job or, work in the real world probably could not have actually helped make the connections. But once I got a job and once I started engaging in the market and seeing demand and supply and seeing competition and all, everything started to click. So, in the spirit of that, we're getting an econ lesson, on the gaming industry so that you can see why exclusivity is falling apart. And I know we do all the little tic tacs and all the little chatty chits and we talk about the comment sections and all of this stuff. And ladies and gentlemen, yes, there is value in that, but again, it's very important that we actually engage in some academic perspective as to what's going on because the market itself and market forces have been actually correlated in academia for us to be able to recognize when industries are changing and shifting. So I've been, very, very blessed to find a book written by Michael Porter, an econ professor out of Harvard, which he titles On Competition. I think it's more like an advanced paper, but was published into a book. And I've been very excited to actually get a copy of this myself. And so in looking at one of the pages of his, missive on competition, you can see that he writes that there are 5 competitive forces that shape strategies for businesses. This is basically as you open the book, chapter 1, bam, he drops it right there. And so he says this, he says, in essence, the job of the strategist is to understand and cope with competition. Often, however, managers define competition too narrowly, as if it occurred only among today's direct competitors. Yet, competition for profits goes beyond established industry rivals to include 4 other competitive forces: customers, suppliers, potential entrants, and substitute products. In the console conversation, I see it from talking heads across the board. They look at competition from a 1D perspective. Like, it's weird. These guys play 3D games, but all they do when they're looking at consoles and looking at the gaming market is they think about it from a one-dimensional aspect. And I have to confess myself, there are dimensions of gaming that I also miss in my own, conversations, but at least if you're looking at multiple proxy points, you'll realize that there's something very interesting going on. Right now, the competitive market, believe it or not, in terms of where Microsoft stands in with the gaming side, has pushed itself into Steam as well. They're doing some really cool things to pretty much align themselves with a lot of the market and business model that Steam is actually implementing. Steam now finds itself in a competitive space with Microsoft for a platform because Microsoft has made its intentions known to expand its PC store, give developers a smaller cut, 12%, compared to Steam's 12%, and then on the back end work with developers to be able to get their games into the Xbox ecosystem. So they have a lot of work to do, but they're a new entrant in this particular paradigm because Steam has been doing and providing this support for a number of years now. The extended rivalry that results from all 5 forces, according to Michael Porter, defines an industry structure and shapes the nature of competitive interaction within an industry. As different from one another as industries might appear on the surface, the underlying drivers of profitability are the same. A lot of folk will say things like, "Oh, PlayStation has not published its games on, well, more of its games because it has published MLB The Show and all this stuff on PC, on Xbox. Therefore, it's not competing in so and so and so exclusivity XYZ." But many of them don't realize that at the end of the day, the profit model is exactly what needs to basically be looked at very carefully. I made a Google slide yesterday where I pointed out, different games as, and how, for the most part, when you go look on the books, it's not necessarily all about the exclusive game. It's actually about the units of software sold in the first party versus third party realm. We did the numbers. Whether or not a game number one sells, 10 million units or game number two sells 12 million units, in the eyes of the bookkeepers, they're looking at the base level of how many software pieces did we sell from a first party perspective compared to how many software from the third party perspective. Do you know why? Because the third party games only bring in 30%. The first party games bring in 100% revenue. So if they could actually make it happen, they would love to sell more of those first party units. And if they've reached a saturation point in their own ecosystem, which is the PlayStation console, then they have to go and start finding places to sell those units. And they've then pretty much moved now from pretending to be exclusive to going fully day and date on PC with some of their games, all live service games and some of their individual titles. Because at the end of the day, the profit-driven motive is pretty much the same underneath. This is where the whole console conversation needs to get academic. At first, you may think, oh my goodness, this is one of those things where you just come out here and you just talk about your favorite game and why your favorite developer is not bringing their game over here. But then at the end of the day, everybody wants to cite console sales. But then when you say, okay, well, let's look at the overall business, let's look at what's going on underneath the hood, everybody scours and scatters like, a freaking pack of roaches that don't want to have a conversation sensibly anymore. But you got to realize that PlayStation is a gaming company, and gaming they must do, which includes selling and developing games. The global auto industry, for instance, appears to have nothing in common with the worldwide market for art masterpieces. This is crazy. Michael Porter's about to cook. Or the heavily regulated healthcare industry in Europe. But to understand industry competition and profitability in each of these three cases, one must analyze the industry's underlying structure in terms of the 5 forces. See figure 1.1. If the forces are intense, as they are in such industries as airlines, textiles, and hotels, let's put gaming, Michael, for Dr. Porter, for my own little thing. Almost no company earns attractive returns on investment. If the forces are benign, as they are in industries such as software, soft drinks and toiletries, many companies are profitable. Industry structure drives competition and profitability, not whether an industry produces a product or service is emerging or mature, high-tech or low-tech, regulated or unregulated, while a myriad of factors can affect industry profitability in the short run, including the weather and business cycle. Industry cycle manifested in the competitive forces sets industry profitability in the medium and long run. And this is figure 1.1. This is where we were going the whole time. The gaming industry has evolved so crazy and so heavily. I remember somebody telling me, and that at first, Epic Games, when they made Unreal Engine available to the broader market, because Unreal Engine used to be very expensive. I watched. There's a developer who develops on Unity, and he makes videos about the small games that he develops and all. And he used to develop in the gaming industry at large. And he said at one time around Unreal Engine 2-ish or so, and these are his words. I'll find his YouTube channel, and it's an old video he made. He said it used to cost developers and publishers about $1 million to buy into Epic Games Unreal Engine. That's what you had to pay up front. It was like $1 million bucks. But then something basically changed in the gaming industry. Epic decided that it was going to go ahead and make Unreal Engine free up front until you earn $1 million before you start paying them royalties. This pretty much upended the entire conversation. Now, keep in mind, Unity was also there as an engine as well. But Unity, pretty much was still, in a sense, loved and enjoyed by indie gamers. And some people have built 3D, AAA titles out of the Unity engine, or what you consider that. yes, but adding another entrant into the market of, providing a way for gamers to go ahead and make video games, man, this, or developers at least, this pretty much changed the industry significantly. There was also Amazon, who decided that they were going to go ahead and make a lumberjack game engine, which they have now pretty much gone ahead to collapse, but it was built on the framework of CryEngine. I think they paid Crytek a little bit of money, and they decided and said, hey man, Crytek, why don't y'all go ahead and make us a game engine yourself? But they decided, hey, we're going to go ahead and make an open source engine or whatever it is. And that was pretty much, part of that whole lumberjack thing that they were going ahead to do. And then CryEngine themselves also provided their engine, open source, so that people can I say open source, not open source, but made it available so that you can come in, develop your game, and then, basically after your game has been developed, you can then start paying royalty fees. This particular change and shift in software pretty much changed the gaming industry. As much as they may not necessarily be directly, related to sales and all of that stuff, it is still important to acknowledge that, yes, all of them at the end of the day have come to make the whole gaming industry weird. And hence, the market saturation that we're seeing with games everywhere is as a result of these new entrants. So when he says the threat of new entrants in the gaming space, how I interpret this is that now you have a lot of new developers coming into the fold. Many of them are cutting their teeth on, games. And if you look at Steam DB, video game releases for like the year 2024, you can already see that this is becoming a reality, in the sense that these games that are, basically getting developed, this is a release calendar. Where is it at? It's right here. There we go. These games are now becoming more and more and more. I mean, if you look at the trajectory from around the time Epic Games decided that they were going to go ahead and let Unreal Engine 4, be free, that was around 2014. I think from the top of my head, I may be wrong, but you can realize that trajectory in terms of growth of how many games have pretty much launched on Steam within, just a small, time frame. If you look at 2025, there are already over 2,000 games that have launched on Steam. This is because gamers and developers can now get their hands on game engines. There are also old school game libraries as well that allow for gamers to be able to go ahead and make some, small type of games like the Raylib library and all of the above. These things have all added into what has made the competition a very interesting place. Another side is the bargaining power of suppliers. Now, I see this as developers coming in and actually figuring out, okay, man, this is how we're going to supply games, or even these big engine companies and free libraries and whatever, negotiating the terms on how you use their engines, and now fighting amongst more of, each other to provide the best value. Because Unity and Epic and CryEngine are all looking at each other saying, man, I want to get royalties for the next hit. Consider a game like Black Myth Wukong. I guarantee you, Unity would have loved to be in a position to have had their engine make that game, or CryEngine. But it was Unreal Engine that made that game. So yes, they sold 20 million units, but royalties after making $1 million, I've been about 4% or 5%, I can't remember exactly, have been going to Epic Games since then. Hogwarts Legacy, ooh, they sold 25 million units. Well, guess who's been sitting and taking royalties? It's been Epic Games after they made their first $1 million. Bargaining power of buyers. The buyers now have a lot of power. The suppliers have also given us many options. You see things like Game Pass coming to the market. You see things like Steam provide really strong value proposition, and all of these things, they bring themselves into the entire mix of what the competitive market looks like. So as these things are starting to rear their heads, then you have the threat of substitute products or services, which also comes in to influence the bargaining power of buyers. Because now I have options, I have multiple goods, I have multiple services available to me. And you know what? All of the suppliers are happy if I engage them in any of those media, because if they don't engage in those media, someone else is going to come in and actually engage them and take their money. These forces, they all overlap one another in very interesting ways. That's what's really interesting about it. And then finally, rivalry among existing competitors, which is happening on all fronts. I just showed you the one with Epic Games and Unity and CryEngine and all of these other engine providers that may be out there that we don't even know about, right? And Also, within the market and industry, providing different services for different kinds of users. If this particular piece of the market competition is not considered when we talk about the video game discourse, a lot of people are going to be off base. We're going to see a lot of people make some very interesting claims, make faulty conclusions. They're going to go Icarus themselves into oblivion in some weird ways, because the economic reality is that these companies are here to make money, and they will adjust their strategy as necessary or as needed to go ahead and make whatever monies that they intend to. This is not rocket science at the end of the day, but for the most part, I think it tends to be ignored in the entire conversation. So if the market forces continue to get much stronger, you're going to see this whole premise of exclusivity fade away. Nintendo is not immune from market forces. No one is. No company is. No business is. But for the most part, if there are ways that they can basically start to, in a sense, reduce the influence of new entrants, why do you think Nintendo is lawsuit heavy? They understand this very, very well. They realize this, that if any new thing tried to encroach on their space, they are now facing a competitive force, so they push back in ways that they can. You can just see this particular chart. You put it on your wall, replace it with your gaming. If you like gaming discourse, remove your gaming posters and put a chart like this on your wall and interpret moves that you're seeing these businesses make from that perspective. I feel like you gain a very strong understanding of the gaming industry, and you'll probably see some holes with some of the business strategy that's available to some of, the game developers and the game publishers out there. You'll even see how many of them are pretty much, for the most part, wasting time or leaving money on the table that could be precious to their business, but they may be comfortable in other areas. But should those areas basically get any kind of strain on them, you're going to see something change. The right, the right framework that we can look at this is PlayStation canceling a lot of its canceling a lot of its live service games. Since these cancellations have occurred, PlayStation has a backup strategy at the moment, which is PC. That PC strategy is now needing to be more aggressive with existing video games that are under development. So my prediction, based on the market forces, is as the window has been closing in terms of the short period between game releases from console and PC, I think that's what we're going to see first or next. Yes, they already have more games day and date, but now their so-called tentpole IPs like Spider-Man, Wolverine, all other games, I think they're going to have shorter release windows to go on PC. They've seen the PC as a viable market, but they're learning how the ecosystem works. It's quite renegade for them. If they don't take advantage of it, everybody else will. So they are looking at it and saying, if it's not according to Hiroki Totoki, if it's not a threat to our console business, then I think they're signaling to you that they're more than likely going to pretty much have a similar launch cadence like Xbox did in 2016. It's just a prediction based on the market forces, based on what's going on right now in the gaming industry, and I think we're going to see that actually happen. The full PlayStation PC day and date paradigm. It could be, that it never happens, but I don't know. The industry and the way things are going don't lean for anybody being and maintaining such timed exclusivity at this particular moment. Talk to me in the comment section. I appreciate you guys' time and audience. Thanks for indulging me and listening to the video, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.